much for the opportunity to talk today. I'm going to have to explain the newly formed Historic Environment Scotland very briefly and quickly. We are now 8 weeks old, and we are a new organisation formed from the former Historic Scotland and the former Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historic Monuments for Scotland. If nothing else, we have an easier name to say, just calling ourselves Historic Environment Scotland, but it might seem a little bit odd that someone from Historic Environment Scotland, which as far as we're concerned at the moment conjures up images of old trees, is talking about crowdsourcing and what we might have to do with archives and online stuff. But in fact, when you think about our heritage and the work that we've done over the past in the Royal Commission in particular, through the archive collections, the online technology, the work that we've been doing, it actually makes reasonable sense, and it's quite clear why we are where we are. I must apologise also for my rather awful slides. We're waiting for a corporate brand and identity at the moment, so at the moment you get my version of our corporate brand and identity, which is wholly not legal within our organisation, so I'll let you be told off about it at some point in the future. I'm going to make two bold, stupid statements. All crowdsourcing projects are exactly the same. That's number one. And the second one is all crowdsourcing projects are entirely different. That's number two. I've thoroughly enjoyed the first paper this morning, and all the way through I was thinking, oh, so that's what we were doing. Okay, that makes sense now. I'm glad we got that right. Because everything that I've been involved with in terms of crowdsourcing, in some ways, because of the nature of our organisation, we looked around, but then we sort of made it up and did our own thing to make sure that it worked properly. The working properly bit is a challenge sometimes. Today I'm going to very quickly give a practical overview of four projects that we have, four projects or services that we have running within Historic Environment Scotland. Scran, which is an online image, sound, video library containing almost 500,000 entries, which has been going, 500,000 records, which has been going for 20 years. Scotland's Places, which is a collaborative project between the National Library of Scotland, the National Records, and Historic Environment Scotland. It has been going for about 6 years, but its transcription crowdsourcing project has been going for 3. Kanwar is the online database of Historic Environment Scotland that has been around for many years, and an element of that implemented a few years ago was My Kanwar. And finally, Britain from Above, which is almost 100,000 photographs, a project that began again about 5-6 years ago, and has a different way of doing things from the other projects. That's an easy thing for me to say, and we'll figure that one out as we go along. I apologise in advance. I've also invented a new thing called crowd scouring. My typing is quite bad, so if for some reason we have crowd scouring in this presentation, I do apologise. I hope I've got them all. In terms of Scran, I want to look at each of these 4 different services or projects, give you an overview, give you a look of the websites to see what they do, how they function, and then give a quick review after that. It's a lot to do in 20 minutes, and hopefully I'll get through it. Scran has been around for 20 years. It's one of the oldest databases on the internet that presented thumbnails in a grid-like fashion. We did it before Google did it, and that's our claim to fame, but nobody really knows that, which is a shame. We have approximately 491,000 records drawn from over 300 partners all over Scotland and the UK. Libraries, galleries, archives, museums, private companies. And in terms of our crowdsourcing, we allow 2 things, only 2 things. The first is that we allow users to tag from a controlled vocabulary. And secondly, we allow users to offer comment or correction to the resources that we have online. So that's two quite narrow defined pieces of work that our volunteers can do. But we don't seek volunteers, and we don't seek anyone to actually do that for us. It's a function that's there for people to use if they want to. It's a function for people to get involved if they want to, but it's reasonably well hidden and you might not actually see it, and it's not, in our mind, a principal reason for you going to the site. In terms of what a volunteer might be and how they would interact with Scran, it can be a general user. We are not looking for someone with specific knowledge about anything in particular. General user can look at a record and say, that's a tractor, and they will tag tractor, or they will send in a correction if they really want to, saying that's a blue tractor. It's not as specific as with advanced knowledge. That having been said, we have a number of volunteers who have utilised their specialist knowledge to give us thousands of corrections. One of the collections that we have on Scran is the Scotsman Photographic Archive from about 1945 through to 1970. Glass plate negatives, digitised, vaguely catalogued, usually with the wrong date. The content, not great. It was a pencil scribble on the outside of the paper envelope. And we have one volunteer who has looked at 7,000 of those and has filled in all the details about the football teams that are appearing in them, when the matches took place, who the players were, and what the score was at the end. Now, there's no way that we would have the time or the expertise to figure that one out. We don't have the knowledge either. So this one person has contributed to that. When I said tractors early on, we do have the motor enthusiasts, we have the train enthusiasts, we have someone who was convinced about a piece of very interesting Glasgow transport history about buses. When buses in Glasgow were taken into the workshop, their licence plates were taken off, they were repainted, they were sorted up, and a different licence plate was put on. Everyone suspected this was happening, but until the man managed to look to see that the serial numbers on the buses and the registration numbers were different in our photographs, nobody could prove it. That's crowdsourcing. That really is someone sitting down, spending time, figuring these small details out. But we didn't ask anyone to do that for us. Someone just came along and did it. In terms of how the process works, I'll show you, and you can see it is incredibly simple. We try to make it as simple as possible, partly because our level of support that we can offer to the public, to the volunteer, is limited, is quite minimal. We have no formal community. There is no way for people to interact with each other if they volunteer information on Scran. There aren't any get-togethers. Nobody would know anyone else who had contributed to Scran if they walked past each other in the street. They may meet at transport meetings, or they may meet at football meetings, and they might figure that out if they're working on Scran. If they say they're working on Scran, but apart from that, nobody would know. This is the front page of Scran, and it's been the service has been around for 20 years. This iteration of the website has been around for more years than we would care to imagine, and so we have a bit of work to do on that and improving it and redeveloping it. But what we have is a very simple search box and also icons that you can use to navigate through the material. This is one of our records. Billy Connolly. He is in a charity walk in 1985, apparently. He doesn't look to be walking in the picture, but that is a sample record. The details below are incredibly thin because there's more beneath there that obviously you can't see. But if you look very carefully under the photograph, you'll see that there are a few options: save, share, add info. If you click the add info button, and you click the add info link, the next line pops up which says tag, correct or insert. So we really don't make this obvious, we don't make it prominent, but it's there if someone wants to click on some of the links. When you click on tag, you're presented with something like this, controlled vocabulary. The wonder of technology. Yesterday when I was deciding to take a screen grab of this, I find myself trapped. Obviously there are browser issues with this happening here, and that's a symptom of, we implemented this 4 or 5 years ago at least. I'm not sure exactly the last time that we probably looked to see that it was still working. Somebody said earlier, leave the party gracefully. Sometimes you just collapse in a heap in the corner, I think, is the moral of this. Those of us who work on Scran also look at this tagging model and we think, we've got 491,000 records. We have a controlled vocabulary on one page. How's that going to work? That really isn't going to work, because what we're doing is we're providing, well, we don't really get to say tractor, bus, car. We can't possibly do all that sort of information there. So it's one of these instances where we're asking for help, but what kind of result are we actually getting out of it? How valuable is this result? Given that some of our resources have the most minimal of descriptions, yes, there must be some value in it, but we haven't looked at that recently, and it's something that we really do have to revisit. In terms of updating a record, correcting or inserting, well, there you go. That's how we do it. There's a form. Fill in the details, click the button, send it off. It's incredibly simple. It's automated. It has the resource number at the top there. It asks you for your name, your email address, your notes, your comments, and it says click, away it goes. You immediately have a response saying, thank you very much for your correction. We will be back in touch with you. And this is actually quite good. And we have volunteers who come into work with us, and they action these changes, these corrections. So of the 7,000 photographs of football matches, one of our volunteers took every single one of those pieces of information and verified it in the best way that it could be. Eventually we realized, this guy knows more than we do. I think we're going to trust him. And because it's an automated system, once we have corrected that piece of information or updated that piece of information, another button is clicked and the record is then emailed to the contributor. So they know that their information has been incorporated. And we also say, thank you very much. My boss takes great delight in saying that often we get thank you emails for saying thank you to the person who first gave us the piece of information. But that's indicative of the people who get involved in these things. They really are happy and pleased to be involved. And that's something that you've got to take care of when you're working on crowdsourcing projects. So a quick review of what's happening, what happens in Scran. It's an automated service. It allows volunteers to be kept informed of what they're contributing. It's slightly labour intensive because we have to have someone in our building to action these corrections. It's actually quite high, and we're quite pleased to take this information. The crowdsourcing is informal and light, as you can see. You would have to find the button to tell us about it. And can we really say this is crowdsourcing? I'm not sure. I guess we can. If we take it on the principle that archive volunteers, someone who comes into your office, your gallery, your office, your museum, and gives you time, is giving you information, but because these people are sitting at home, I suppose it is crowdsourcing. We're taking information in, we're processing it, we're adding it. This is a valuable lesson though, and we never set out to do crowdsourcing. We added it in later, and we get passing trade. I think that's the best way of describing it. We don't advertise that we're looking for people to help us update our records, but people do. A final point, the crowdsourced data augments our records. We have no separate output, and we have no intention of using that output separately either. All these points make sense as we go along. Scotland's Places, completely different from Scran. Collaborative project founded in 2009, which brings together records from the National Records of Scotland, the National Library, and the Royal Commission. That's my first slip of the day, Historic Environment Scotland. The crowdsourcing element is the transcription of 220,000 pages of historic archives located at the National Records of Scotland. These records date from the 17th to the 19th centuries. They are a mixture of taxation records and Ordnance Survey name books, which gives information about places in Scotland. To enable the transcription, we had to come up with what we feel is a high-tech solution. I could start talking about Ajax and other things, and I wouldn't know what I was talking about, but our internal in-house developers had to provide us with a system where people could work on a variety of documents, have a number of different ways of viewing, manipulating the images, and entering the data in real time. And so they've implemented that, and it works. There are a few quirks, we have a few problems with it, but it does work. We require from the volunteers an understanding of where they are at. So we've determined that some of the work is for a beginner level, an intermediate level, or an advanced level. So we've done that work in advance for the volunteer to determine what they can do. The volunteers must be computer savvy. That's a difficult one. Some of the volunteers, and we've had over 3,500, have never used really the internet before. That's a challenge for us when we have to consider how we're going to start from scratch. And is that something that we can do? We did do it. We provided workshops and talks all over the country for a year and got people involved, demonstrated the system, sat down and helped them use it. So that was something that worked. Automated process, yes, we generally, everything is done within the system, so that's there. Importantly in this one, because of the some of the complexity of the task involved and the need for accurate data, we have continued to make this project archival staff led and supported by the community rather than community led and supported by the staff. It's necessary. There's no way that we can get around that. Mainly because at the end of the day, someone has to make certain decisions about some of the work coming through, and volunteers, is it their job? Is it their job to make decisions about where things go? Scotland's Places, this is the website. There are 220,000 pages of historic archives, but also there are over 2 million resources altogether. There are maps, there are photographs, geographical information. The transcription part of the website, we built in a number of usual indicators that we all thought were necessary at the start of the project. How much have we done? Who is the greatest contributor? Where are we on this record set? What is the difficulty of this and that? I think it has been important, but since the same person has been top of the list since we started, well, we could put in a top 5 or we could put in a top 10. I'm not sure whether it matters really. We were always of the opinion in the beginning that competition is a good thing, but actually I don't think competition really matters. People just want to be involved and do their bit. Whether or not they know what they're doing on a leaderboard is neither here nor there. Interestingly, a comment about the crowd. We soft launched this transcription project 1 week in 2003, and we thought we're just going to leave it there. We're not going to tell anyone that it's arrived. We're just going to put it up there and leave it. That happened on a Thursday. It was one of the reasons why we soft launched it, because it went live on a Thursday. You should never do things at the end of the week. I came in on Monday, and all of a sudden the bar had shifted, and I thought, what's going on here? And somebody had found the website of their own accord, and over the weekend had transcribed 400 pages. Just like that. Diane is our top contributor. She's one of our moderators. She's been there since before the project started, I suppose you could say. So you can never underestimate who exactly comes to volunteer for you, how they get there, and what they're going to do for you. The historic archives, this is an interesting one as well. We transferred the historic archives from an archival perspective into the digital world. So we have contents pages listing every single page. We give a status on if the page is clean to be started, if there are some contributions there, if it's completed, and if it's locked, if it's finished. And we have these amazing little icons, open padlocks, warning signs. We have everything there. They do work. It allows people to find material to do transcription work. This is an example of how we transcribe. Our IS people developed this, what I suppose we can call the Transcription Dashboard, divided into 3. At the top you have the image with a few tools attached to that. In the middle you have the workspace, as we call it, which can be empty boxes which correspond to columns, or an empty box just to type anything into. And then underneath that, after you've clicked save, the information passes down and you can edit that in the future and take that elsewhere. It looks pretty simple. It's it can be a little bit different if you're just starting off. Most volunteers, if they've been volunteering in archives certainly, will be quite used to an offline version of volunteering, an Excel spreadsheet or a database. It's quite amazing how people will react differently to something being online, when in fact it's almost the same process, it's just presented slightly differently. Each page in the project is linked, can be linked to a bulletin board entry. This is so that any volunteer can ask a question about a page. That's either, I can't read this word, or really this form that's been implemented doesn't work for the type of transcription that's going on. So it's quite practical. Staff usually keep out of the bulletin boards, the discussion boards. The community help each other there. Those are the people who are on the site daily. They've seen this problem before, they've seen a solution before, they can direct people and say, well, this is what we did before, this is how this can happen. It was an unconscious decision not to get involved in the bulletin boards. When I did dip my toe in occasionally, I usually got something wrong or contradicted something I'd said earlier, so in the end I said there's no point in me going there because actually people know more than I do, and that's the best way of working that there. In terms of the Scotland's Places Review, it's an automated service, allows the volunteers to control the input. It's labour intensive because of the type of data that we're getting out of it. It requires a high level of support, both staff and technical, but the new data being created has a high potential for reuse. We are creating tabulated data. The taxation records that we are transcribing are comparable with the taxation records in Sweden in the 18th century, and they're doing great studies about taxation there, and we're doing nothing. So really, we could be doing a lot with the outputs from this. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to run through this. My Kanwar. Kanwar is a database of Historic Environment Scotland that was developed by the Royal Commission. It holds information about places in Scotland, buildings, ancient monuments. It links photographs, geospatial data, maps, plans, all of that there. At some point in the distant past, it was recognised that there are people out there who take pictures and know things about places as well as the people who work in the building. So maybe they could upload some of that information, some of the images that they have, and they can augment the record. Already exists, so they can't create a new record in our database there. It's automated. Interestingly, I asked in the last couple of days, who actually takes care of this in the building? Because I couldn't think who did. And everyone looked blankly and thought, well, we're not sure if anyone does anymore. Leave the party gracefully. We're still hanging about, and we just haven't turned out the lights or put a new record on or something. I'm not sure what we're doing with this one here. The data quality is variable. There's no structure to it. It's informal, it's light. But we do benefit from key stakeholder communities giving us information. Front page of Kanwar there. This is an example of my Kanwar. We take pictures of car parks. But obviously in here, there is some reason for this. Someone has taken a picture of this and they've attached it to an existing record. We have a team of photographers in Historic Environment Scotland, but they're not going to go out and take pictures like that every day. And so having the added information from the crowd is useful. You have your own dashboard, you log in, you can look at everything that you've contributed. I contributed this yesterday. I made a comment on something that was in the database. Already I know that there are 2 things wrong in it. I can go back and edit that. I can correct it as myself. I'm still trying to find out who in the organisation can correct it as well. But that's the way things are. Again, just reviewing what we do. It's crowdsourcing light. There's no control over the input. And again, our data augments or supports the existing records, and there's no separate reuse of that envisaged. Written from above is great fun. 96,000 records, photographs, aerial photography dating from 1919 through to the mid-20th century. It allows tagging of locations within images and also the upload of contemporary imagery. Again, it's general, you don't have to have specialist input, but we are now finding that there are people out there who have specialist knowledge who are adding all the time to this. There is a strong formal community in this. They have met in the past. Online, they use the discussion facilities quite often to talk. This is written from above. Front page, bottom right, you'll see activity. Constantly updating the activity there, which hopefully encourages people. Very simply, you'll find a picture which is identified by very basic metadata that has been brought together in-house. And if you see something in that picture that you recognise, plant a pin and tell us about it. It's great, simple. You can say that's a coal shed, that's a railway station, that's Glasgow Central Railway Station. But as you can see, there's no structure to what you add there. This is St Paul's in London. You can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pins there. You can also upload contemporary photographs as well, so that's an option to do there. On the right hand side here, this is the activity associated with each one of with that photograph, but we have an activity log for each photograph, so you can tell that there's comments being made, annotations being made, something's being uploaded. We have the various groups that were set up. Schools, there are people who are interested in schools, so all they do is look for schools and they tag schools and they discuss schools. So that really has been a successful part. Crowdsourcing lights with little ongoing resource implications. Initially written from above was Heritage Lottery funded. Part of the funding was to set up the communities, and fingers crossed it would carry on and the community would take it over. They did. They've carried on. I think that's partly because of the, I don't want to say simplicity of the task, but the task is a simple one. See something, pin it, describe it. You don't have to go back to someone and say, am I doing this right? Because we haven't said what's right and what's wrong. Again, the crowdsourced data augments the records, the metadata that were created in-house, and there's no, at the moment, separate reuse of that. So, I have a few summing up points. Crowdsourcing for us is always great fun. We have an initial idea, We want to know what we want to get out of it. We then have the frazzled period in the middle where we try to tell the techie people that no, it has to do that because we've decided that it must do that. And then we have to decide what we're going to do at the end of it. But before all that starts, and these are lessons learned, know your records and know what you want to do with them. If you have photographs, if you have documents, take them apart completely, sit down, spend time understanding the records before you start to get people working on them in a crowdsourcing way. Because if you don't know the records, I can assure you, you will be asked every single awkward question that exists in the world about the record in front of you there. Decide what you want to get out of it. In those 4 projects, some of them have data that we can reuse in different ways. Some of them simply augment the data that we already have, and sometimes we don't do anything other than augment our own data. We have a separate data set associated with sites in Kanwar, but because it hasn't been validated, we don't use that. It just sits there. Understand the resource implications. That's always a big one. Staffing, Scotland's Places. If you launch a transcription project online and you appear or you're heard on BBC Radio Scotland at 6:30 and you end your day on BBC Reporting Scotland at 10:30 at night, be prepared for the 2,500 people to sign up within the next 48 hours. And then be prepared to understand that you can't process all of the work that's associated with 2,500 people in the 72 hours that you say that you will do that. So be aware of all these things. Plan for the future of your data, quality control, potential reuse, define the scale and scope before you launch the project, and it sounds really simple, run a testing phase with 20 pages before you launch 220,000 pages. We launched 220,000 pages, and again, every single problem that could come up did. Phase your launch if you're doing crowdsourcing. Get it out there in stages. Understand the problems that are associated with the volunteers working for you, not just you getting the stuff online. That really is a scamper through 4 projects at Historic Environment Scotland, and if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
People are not sure, they haven't started yet in the room, but are thinking about it, this idea of staging it and starting small first and testing out well. I think it's very sensible advice. Were there any questions or comments? Roger, do you mind passing it to Mango and then here at the front?
I'll start. Andrew, fascinating. I'm intrigued with Scran as to whether there's any correlation between those who are getting involved, updating data, putting new data in, and the fact that they have paid for the privilege of accessing the greater quantity of data that you get through the now slightly strange and anachronistic subscription model that lurks somewhere in the site.
Well, in 2 cases, there is a pay model, Scran and Scotland's Places. And if I deal with Scotland's Places first, to access the historic archives costs £15 per quarter. If you transcribe, and you want to be a transcriber, so long as you transcribe 1,000 words per month per 28-day period, and we have that automated in the system, you don't pay. So you sign up, and within your first month, so long as you've typed in 1,000 words, hopefully they're reasonable words and the right words, your subscription carries on, and it's a quid pro quo. You just carry on. Scran is a subscription-based service. It's excellent value for money, I have to say. But the notion of how to access Scran, yes, is different. People don't expect to pay to access this material anymore. And in the majority of cases, you don't have to. Scran is available in 28 local authority library services. 26 of those offer at-home use. So you go to Scran, you type in your library card, and you have free access. You don't pay a subscription. It is a model of its day. It came from the mid-1990s, and I think we do our best to bring that into the present day. But yeah, if you have free access to it, you're contributing your time. I don't think we have ever looked into who actually pays and who contributes and whether or not they pay. I have a feeling that they don't, because 75% of the country have access through their local library anyway. And every school and every university as well. So access is actually quite free now.
Hi there. Regarding the augmenting records using photographs, are those images not moderated at all?
And not having worked on Britain from above, I can only say that likely there will be something technical in the background, but apart from that, no, they're not.
So someone could put up anything. And
but on saying that though, someone who can put up anything, but you must be registered on the website. You must have gone through your CAPTCHA to make sure that you're not a spam bot. So if you are registered and putting something up on the website, if you're going to put up something that is not appropriate, then we'll know who you are, and then we can take steps to remedy that.
Doesn't deter everyone. But the other question I have is that for those crowdsourced images, what kind of license is then attributed to those when they're published on the site? As was touched on earlier, we have terms and conditions associated with each of the services. Scotland's Places, you agree to make available your transcription data to the Crown. It's given a Crown copyright. Britain from Above, again, because I haven't worked on it, I believe from memory that you will be asked to, I don't know is the answer. Britain from Above is a partnership project between the Royal Commission in Wales, Historic England and Historic Environment Scotland. So I don't know whether there is any assignment goes on there, I'm not sure. So if there's a violation of copyright where someone's taken an image from elsewhere, then is it you that becomes responsible for that? Or is the contributor?
The contributor, I imagine, in line with everything else, is responsible for uploading. We will simply remove something if it's infringed copyright. Whether or not we would have any liability there, that's what we've all got lawyers for, I'm sure.
Why are you asking them? What background? The copyright?
Well, I mean, we work with moving images, and we have very sort of stringent copyright rules and regulations that we follow, and so it's just something of interest because someone could take content from one site, put it up on another site, and not actually have
there are various
permission to do that. And then, so if for example, if our organisation was to do a similar project, I think it's important to know what the sort of takedown policies might be in legal instruction.
I would assume that in the legals associated with contributing, one, you must have the copyright of the photographs yourself, and two, you must allow them, a third-party use.
It's something that, in my experience working with the public, is that that's something that a lot of people are not aware of or interested in is copyrights.
It's one of the problems with crowdsourcing projects where, because it's available on the internet, therefore it should be freely available to me. Is a slight attitude that comes through, and that's not in fact the case.
I'm going to stop it there because we're running a little bit behind. Thank you so much again.